People cling to the joy of the past because the present can often feel so difficult to process. When you're experiencing both the good and the bad at the same time, it can be really hard to separate the two. But when we begin looking back to our childhood, we've had some time to compartmentalize. We can usually be a bit more selective, choosing to focus on the nice and happy things that have happened because, well, nice things are nice to think about. It makes our little monkey brain happy. These sentimental feelings of affection for the past are called nostalgia. And companies understand that anything that's going to spark those little happy nostalgic feelings, well, that's going to sell.
Nostalgia. It's delicate, but potent.
We have ColourPop launching makeup inspired by Lizzie McGuire and the Powerpuff Girls, Hot Topic shirts with characters from Danny Phantom, Real Monsters, the Rugrats, the Wild Thornberrys, Land Before Time. Basically, any old cartoon you can think of has been slapped onto a shirt. And hey, there's even a Nickelodeon subscription box, so you can have your monthly fix of nostalgia-fueled serotonin delivered right to your doorstep. You could honestly decorate your entire house with Sailor Moon merchandise, and the show hasn't been on the air for over 25 years.
Are you wearing the
Sailor Moon symbol 7-quart slow cooker?
Yeah, I am.
But I've noticed something missing from the tsunami of nostalgic merchandising that's flooding the market. Where is Hamtaro? What happened to that cute little orange and white hamster and all of his little hamster friends? And the funny thing is, I know I'm not alone in this. I tweeted out into the void, just expressing my frustration and anger when I realized this. And to my surprise, the void shouted back. There are so many people out there who felt the same way as me, wondering where Hamtaro went and why we don't see Hamtaro merchandise like we do see merchandise for other nostalgic things that we love. Well, in this video, we're going to discuss the history of Hamtaro and exactly why we don't see this franchise around anymore. So settle in and let's get started. Hamtaro is the creation of Ritsuko Kawai, born in 1964 in Toyonaka, Japan. In 1997, at the age of 33, her story titled Totoku Hamtaro, which roughly translates to Trotting Hamtaro, was published in the second grade version of Shogakukan Learning Magazines. Shogakukan was a magazine series that began in 1922 and was separated into 6 different versions, one targeted for each grade level from 1st to 6th grade. As Totoku Hamtaro's popularity grew, the stories began to be placed into the magazines for other grade levels, and eventually spawned an entire book series that spanned 4 volumes. The manga is done in sort of a slice of life style, following the life of a little hamster named Hamtaro, with sections where he breaks the fourth wall to discuss proper hamster care with the reader. The book also featured sheet music composed by Ritsuko titled Hamtaro's Song, which would eventually be used as the opening song for the anime. Yep, this was the first Hamtaro anime. In September of 1999, this direct-to-VHS Hamtaro anime was released. It had a very limited distribution and was given either for free to employees of Shogakukan who had elementary school-aged children, or it was obtained by ordering it via mail from Shogakukan first grade for 1,200 yen, which is approximately $10 at the time. It looks pretty different from the anime we're all used to, following the gentle pastel textured style of Ritsuko Kawai's manga more closely. The plot of the 4 short episodes also follows the manga storyline. It even had a cute little segment showing how to draw Hamtaro via song. Now, the Hamtaro anime that we all know and love aired just a year later on July 7th, 2000 in Japan. In case you've stumbled onto this video and you're not at all familiar with Hamtaro, first of all, welcome. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoy it. And secondly, let me give you just a bit of a recap and a summary of what exactly the Hamtaro anime is all about. The series follows the life of a little hamster named Hamtaro who's owned by Laura Haruna. I'll be using all the English dub names for this video just because that's what I'm most familiar with. I'll have the easiest time pronouncing it, and I think that's also what's going to be most familiar for folks watching this video. The first few episodes of the show set up the main premise and introduce us to all of the hamsters that we will see throughout almost every episode. In the first episode, Hamtaro meets Oxnard, a bashful hamster with an insatiable appetite. The pair run into Boss, a wild hamster with an underground home that later becomes the Ham Ham Clubhouse, the main meeting place for the gang. He introduces them to Bijou, a true icon with the most incredibly awful French accent that is just...
Are you happy to be in Paris?
It makes me happy.
In the second episode, we meet the charismatic southern hamster Howdy, his best friend / rival Dexter, who is a know-it-all, the sweet and gentle Pashmina, and the baby of the group Penelope. And Snoozer, whose main personality trait is just sleeping a lot. Then, the third episode introduces us to the super smart Maxwell, Cappy, who kind of just likes to put different things on his head, Panda, who is known for his carpentry and repair skills, and the bright and bubbly Sandy. Skip ahead to episode 13 and 14, and it turns out Sandy has a long-lost brother, and he joins the gang and completes the crew. But I honestly wish he didn't.
Hey, gorgeous, where you been all my life?
He's kind of really gross and icky, and his main thing is just uncomfortable flirting with all the female hamsters, which, watching it as an adult, kind of yucky and uncomfortable to watch, really. Once the main cast is introduced, all the remaining episodes follow a pretty similar structure. Laura will leave the house to go to school, to hang out with friends, or for some other reason, leaving the coast clear for Hamtaro to sneak away and meet up with his friends. They'll run into some sort of problem, maybe meet a new side character. And quick sidebar, I would just like to take this moment to show you some of my favorite side character hamsters that I found during my research. There are just some bizarre designs that I need the world to see. There's Championi, UGQ, Marika, Ook Ook, the list goes on. There are just so many weird hamsters. Anyways, they all eventually work together to solve the problem they encountered early in the story. Bada bing, bada boom, everyone's happy. The episodes always end with Hamtaro safe at home, seated beside Laura as she writes in her diary before bed. The series is very episodic with no real overarching plot or storyline. Now, the anime was a huge hit. I seriously cannot stress enough how massive Hamtaro was in Japan at the time. After just 2 years, it had made approximately $2.5 billion in movie, publishing, toy, apparel, and food licensing deals. Hamtaro is one of the highest grossing media franchises of all time. It has made more money than franchises like Scooby-Doo, The Powerpuff Girls, Indiana Jones, Finding Nemo,
Flops.
and Overwatch. Hamtaro has made more money than one of the biggest game series of all time, Overwatch.
Hey, Flop.
How are you feeling?
Hey, Flop.
That just blew my mind when I found that out. Anyways, let's move on to how Hamtaro came to America. There was an absolute anime boom in the 90s in North America. There are a multitude of factors as to why there was a sudden surge in the popularity of the medium. But the big one is VHS. This relatively compact format for storing video made it much easier and cheaper to distribute anime from overseas than ever before. Anime distribution companies popped up left and right, as it was suddenly much easier to enter the industry. And more distribution companies meant an influx of new titles became available to American audiences. Now, it wasn't all smooth sailing to start with. Many companies struggled when localizing titles, leading to some interesting choices in dubs.
It's about time I was allowed to have some fun. Now I'm going to teach our visitor a lesson.
No, don't do it! He's too powerful!
You're right. Why didn't you tell me sooner?
Hey, Benton, don't crap your pants if you see a vampire out there.
Get lost. You wouldn't recognize a goddamn vampire if one jumped up and bit you on the end of your So just get off my back.
Oh, come on. What's life without love? It's like your sword without its scabbard.
What'd you do with Usopp?
At the beginning of the push to televise anime, shows were also often aired during crummy time slots that led to low viewership. Then, everything changed when Toonami attacked. Created by Sean Akins and Jason DeMarco, Toonami was an action-packed block of weekday programming on Cartoon Network that ran for 2 hours right after school. Both of the creators were massive fans of Japanese animation. DeMarco said that their aim with this new block was to expose as many people as possible to things that we think are really good. So kids would hop on the bus after school, race home, and turn on the TV just in time to catch shows like Voltron, Gundam, Cardcaptors, Sailor Moon, and Dragon Ball Z. Shows unlike anything they had ever seen before. And many of these shows were breakout hits, garnering mainstream attention and attracting huge viewership. On September 30th of 1999, Dragon Ball Z attracted an audience of 1.7 million viewers. This was the highest viewership the network had seen to date. While there are many contributing factors, Toonami is truly the reason for the anime boom in the 90s and early 2000s. So, with the recent success and rise in popularity of anime with American audiences, companies were looking for the next big hit that could rival things like Pokemon and Sailor Moon. It seemed like an absolute no-brainer to bring this cash cow of a franchise Hamtaro stateside next. Keep in mind, at this point, Hamtaro had made $2.5 billion in revenue in Japan. Now, remember Toonami, that action-packed programming block I was just talking about? Well, that's the block they decided to slot Hamtaro into. Kids who had come to expect high-octane thrills from Toonami hopped off the school bus and raced home to find a sweet show about cute hamsters airing at 4 p.m. It first aired in June of 2002, but was only kept in that Toonami slot for 5 months, before being moved around and shown at various times on Cartoon Network, like early mornings or just before the Toonami slot began. Hamtaro would continue airing until October of 2004, with its final episode being Ham Ham Halloween, which is kinda fitting because just like a ghost, it was gone. In my research, I found a good handful of forum posts from the time debating the topic of Hamtaro being aired on Toonami. Here are some comments from a forum post on AnimeSuperhero.com in 2002. Don't air it on Toonami, air it any other time. It isn't an action show, so should not be on an action block. This is just wrong. Maybe Cartoon Network will acquire the rights to Blue's Clues and put that on Toonami. I have nothing against Hamtaro, but Toonami's a place for action cartoons, not cutesy-wootsy stuff like this. Who's the bonehead that made this decision? I think the show looks cute, and I will check it out, but I don't think it belongs on Toonami. I will watch it because it looks like it could be a great show. I agree though, Toonami is a dumb place to put it. It not only detracts from Toonami's action theme, but I think this bad scheduling is actually militating against Hamtaro's success. A new show has a hard time making it unless it's surrounded by similar shows. Hey, even the creators of Toonami said that it didn't belong.
Number 3 on our greatest fails is Hamtaro, which I do not think is actually a bad show, was just very much not a Toonami show.
Yeah.
This was another one that we were highly encouraged / given no choice over to air, and that was just sort of the deal those days, was just sometimes it was like,
we weren't in control of
here's the next show that we're putting on Toonami.
So, it would seem that the suboptimal time slot was the reason behind Hamtaro's failure. But that can't be all. It's impossible that the time slot is solely to blame. There are some other factors that have to be taken into account. Attitude towards animated shows differs greatly in American and Japanese culture. We are currently seeing a boom in cartoons for adults here. Shows like Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman, and Big Mouth heavily push the maturity of their content. This idea of cartoons for adults feels so fresh and groundbreaking because for such a long time, we have held this belief that they really can't be. Well, there are some exceptions to this. For the most part in American popular culture, animation has been seen as for kids for a while now. Wisecrack has an incredible video on this, and I highly recommend you check it out. I will link it in the description down below. But the short story is, early animation was experimental, and it was targeted at both adults and children, playing right before live action feature films. Through a variety of factors, this adult cartoon industry died out around the 50s. In the 60s, as the popularity of television rose, we saw a rise in cartoons marketed specifically towards children, which is really how cartoons got their reputation as being kids' media. In contrast, we can look at a fact that Sean Akins, former creative director of Toonami, mentioned when discussing the popularity of Hamtaro in a 2002 interview with USA Today. Talking about the target demographic of the series, he predicted the show would resonate with preschool-aged children, but made it clear that he expected an older age group to enjoy it as well for its American launch, calling attention to the fact that mothers were the second largest demographic for the show in Japan. In Japan, it is just generally more culturally acceptable for people older than the intended age demographic of an anime to be a fan. We can look to information gathered by the NHK around the demographics of the Magical Girl series Pretty Cure. A whopping 48% of viewers from the original series in 2004 were in the age range of 20 to 29. And 15 years later, in 2019, 32.5% of viewers were 20 to 29, while 23.5% of viewers were 30 to 39. So we see this vast difference between American and Japanese culture surrounding animated television that can offer us some explanation as to why Hamtaro just didn't flourish stateside. There is another facet of cultural context to be considered when breaking down exactly why Hamtaro wasn't a money-making monster when it crossed the Pacific Ocean. Before I start this section, I just want to give a content warning for racism, slurs, war, and violence. If any of these topics will be upsetting to you, please skip ahead to the timestamp listed here. Orientalism has a deep and complex history, and it's important to consider just how much of a role it plays when looking to the reception of cultural imports. Before continuing, let's break down exactly what the term Orientalism means. The word was coined by famous Palestinian-American cultural critic Edward Said in 1978 with the publishing of his text that shared the same name. In it, he explains that Orientalism is a style of thought based upon a distinction between the Orient and, most of the time, the Occident, that guides people to accept the ideas of basic differences between the West and the East. It is a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient, deeply rooted in colonial power structure. Orientalism removes control from Asian countries, using stereotypes and prejudices to decide how the West both represents and perceives said countries and their people. I highly recommend checking out Said's book if you're interested in exploring these ideas further. I will leave a link to that in the description as well. As I mentioned, Orientalism has an incredibly complex history dating all the way back to the 18th century. It could be argued, though, that it was at a peak during and after World War II. Am I about to tell you that Hamtaro didn't succeed in America because of Pearl Harbor? Not exactly. What I'm saying is that because of that conflict, at the time there were certain stereotypes about Japanese people that were pushed for political reasons. It is a whole lot easier to fight a war against monsters than it is against human beings. We can see these ideological seeds being planted, allowing Orientalist cultural ideas of Japanese people as uncivilized, immoral, and violent, especially towards Americans, to take root. Because of this, it is reasonable to assume that over time people would generally be more receptive to violent Japanese media. These displays of violence coming from Japan help to support the understanding of America as a more civilized country. Now, where exactly does Hamtaro and anime in general really tie into all of this? Well, in 1999, an article for the Wall Street Journal written by Sally Beatty sensationalized the phenomenon of anime with a title that reads, "Kids are glued to a violent Japanese cartoon show." The article really focuses on this idea of just how dark and edgy Dragon Ball Z is, explaining that Vegeta nearly gets strangled to death by his foe Frieza, and that the same villain who almost killed one protagonist impales another with his horns. BD goes on to explain that, by Japanese standards, its level of violence was considered mainstream. Now, it is absolutely necessary to unpack this specific statement. We can clearly see the lingering Orientalist views being expressed here. By stating that DBZ's level of violence is normal for Japan, BD implies that there is a culture of violence present there that does not exist in America, directly comparing Japan and America through an Orientalist lens. We saw a lot of anime that feature battle in some form succeed in the 2000s. Shows like Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, and Sailor Moon all featured elements of fighting. Yes, they are complex shows with a depth of beautiful messages to impart onto their viewers, but there is still this common thread of battle and fighting between all of them. Selectively importing media that has characters fighting as one of the main elements places an Orientalist lens up to Japanese media, where cultural curators in the form of TV executives decide exactly how Western audiences will understand Japan. When it comes to Hamtaro, the problem is there's no real violence, battling, or fighting in any of the episodes. Hamtaro focuses on telling the story of friendship and cooperation. In an episode, Bijou loses her favorite ribbon, so the gang goes hunting for acorns to cheer her up. Laura is missing her glass slipper to play Cinderella, so the gang makes it their mission to bring it to her school before the curtain goes up. The show is really about little hamsters and their big adventures where they work together to solve any problems that come their way. And because it doesn't really service the American idea of Japan as uncivilized, immoral, and violent, the American populace just may not have been ready to receive it. Now remember, these are all just theories. I do just think that it's super important to look at the idea of how so much of our cultural context does inform the way that we consume media. So, although it's very likely that the main factor in the failure of Hamtaro was its Toonami time slot, it's impossible to ignore that there are some other factors that may have had an impact on its success. I started this video by asking, why aren't we seeing anyone capitalizing on the Hamtaro nostalgia? And it seems that the answer is just simply because there's not enough demand. The franchise never really made enough of a profit or an impact in the first place to be milked for cash a second time around. But it's fascinating to consider how sociocultural, economic, and historical factors may have played a role and influenced the cross-cultural reception of this piece of media. It is not too far-fetched to consider that Orientalism and systematic racism towards East Asian people played a huge part in the history of Hamtaro. I hope that you can walk away from this video with a more critical outlook on how the Western lens can affect how you view non-Western media. There are tons of amazing creators out there offering their perspective on Orientalism in contemporary media, such as Wes Anderson films and Cyberpunk 2077, and I'll link those down below as well. If you do really miss Hamtaro, I highly recommend you go find that old copy of Ham Ham Heartbreak and give it another playthrough, or find old episodes online and watch them with your friends. It's worth it, I promise you. You don't have to spend a single dime to enjoy that nostalgia. And hey, maybe that's better than seeing your childhood memories dragged through the mud just to make a buck or two. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's my first video essay, so I put a ton of time and effort into it, and I really hope you did like it. I'll be making more in the future, so make sure you are subscribing. If you like this video, and I would love to hear your favorite Hamtaro memories down in the comments below. I stream on Twitch every Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Thursday, and I will link that somewhere here or somewhere down there. In my next video, we'll be fighting evil and winning love, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Yeah. Boopity bop 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 bop. I hope I did good. I don't want to record that again.